Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final day of NRF 2019. We thank you all for coming, and you're in for a treat today. Today's session is what grocery retail will look like in 2030. You're about to hear from David Marcotte and Carl Boutet. As you know, David is from Kantar Consulting, and Kantar provides a wealth of retail information. And that explains why me, Susan Retta, the editor of Stores Magazine, has decided to partner with Kantar on so many projects. We work with Kantar to produce the annual Top 100 Retailers, the Hot 100 Retailers, and these features appear in our July and August issues. And I invite you to keep an eye out for our newest collaboration, the Top 50 Global Retailers, which will debut in Store's February-March issue. I now would like to invite David and Carl to the stage.
Thank you. All right, we're on.
Good morning. This is an unusual presentation in some ways in that we talk the usual. Okay, here we go. You can hear me now? Very good. Thank you. That's the type of thing you wake up at about 3 in the morning, discover you gave a 30-minute speech and nobody could hear you because they never turned it on, and it was a tremendous success. So that just kind of works that way. This is a very different type of project that we did. It's a very different type of presentation. We talk about the future, we talk about stores in the future, and all these different iterations, and frankly, we tend to be a little messy. The client that did this with me, which was the Coca-Cola Retailing Research Council, had very strict guidelines to it, which could be summarized as, we want to make money in the future. We have existing stores. We have existing talent. We have people that we have to leverage. How are we going to take our existing space and move it into 2030? How are we going to make that work best for us in terms of that? What is the relationship between complex automation, artificial intelligence, robots, employees, we're on a set, and frankly, how are we going to invest to get up to there and such? So these are all the relevant things that we're going to cover about in this morning in terms of this. It makes sense. I'm being joined by Carl. Carl and I are going to take this back and forth in terms of showing you some key elements of this that you need to consider as you move forward. But again, I cannot emphasize enough the reality of the future as opposed to the fantasy of it is really what's guiding this work and a lot of the things that are there and such. So we're going to have a future shopper. We're going to have a shopper that quite frankly, we have already. They're going to be older, and that's something else we need to contend with. They're going to be a little bit more fussy, but they're going to have 4 key elements that they're going to be very, very much reflecting. Connections, they're going to have an assumption of automatic connections. They're going to have an assumption of what we refer to as Omni Digital, that all digital is capable of speaking and integrating with itself, such as it's in the background. In 10 years, that's a very relevant thing to do. So connections becomes extraordinarily important. When we look at flow, we're talking about something else, which is, I have a very busy life, I have a lot of things to do, I have a lot of stuff going. Shopping has to fit in the flow. Where I'm going in shopping needs to fit in that flow. If it doesn't, then I need to be online shopping. So my choices that make the flow, the rhythm of my life work is absolutely critical. Experiences we've been talking about, the shopper is overwhelmingly much more engaged with experiences. But, and the but is a little bit different, we need to be realizing that experience that they're now expecting going forward is becoming more and more customized. It's not sufficient to have an entire store's experience, it has to be the customer's engagement inside of that, but contradictory but very true, it has to be some element of simplicity. I can't complicate their lives. I can't make it more, it doesn't mean I'm reducing items or SKUs or these types of things. What I'm really, really trying to do is produce for them a simple approach to how they're going to be their shopping needs and how they're going to realize them as they go forward.
Right, so this notion of frictionless and removing all the pain points, simplicity is sort of the combination of frictionless and experience. So I think that's where we're going to be seeing more and more people pushing. Before we talked about selection and making it endless aisle. So in 10 years from now, this notion of endless aisle is going to become curated aisle, and knowing me better than I know myself, and really creating those selections that are tailored to me in real time through these 4 conditions.
So when we look at this new type of shopper, we describe him as an Epicurean. For those of you that successfully avoided philosophy in college and such, an Epicurean is someone that is looking for a rich, varied, simple existence. They're looking for one that is rich in the experiences they're seeking out, but one that is, in essence, simple. And there are two different elements to this that's creating this shopper right now that in 10 years will be the dominant factors. One being an empowerment. I can shop where I want to, when I shop to. The availability of online versus in-store. I still want to go in-store, but if it doesn't fit what I want in terms of what I want, I can go there. If the products are not one place, I can go someplace else. The sense of empowerment has increased tremendously in terms of where people feel they can go forth and find the goods that they need. But the other side of this is fragmentation. Fragmentation in terms of being able to get down to more narrow slices of what they're interested in, either being ethnic, demographic, socio-demographic, or whatever. Those fragmentation, those smaller shopping experiences that they can go, balance against that empowerment. And these two together create a friction that kind of balances out between the simplicity and the empowerment that we were talking about.
What I found really interesting in the report, because there's actually a much deeper report that sort of hits the data points behind this, but this correlation and the fact that you see these overlapping is really what it's really telling us is that empowerment is really this notion of what matters to me, and that's what sort of drives this fragmentation, right? So the fact that if I'm really super environmentally conscious, and that's what's going to drive a lot of my shopping behavior in the future, and that's going to be my prime driver, might be very different from my neighbor who's going to have something very, so I'm empowered, and that's also provoking that fragmentation more and more.
So there's three key elements that we need to contend with when we're looking at the shopper engaged in the stores. First and foremost, values rule. The idea of transparency, the idea of GMO, the idea that I know where my product's coming from, I know what's behind it, I know where it was manufactured, I know where that services are based on. Values associated to where I shop and it is increasingly becomes more important as it goes through. Again, simplicity is routines. We have found overwhelmingly that routines are dominating shopping more and more globally. So we find in the US, 10 years ago, people used to go to 14 stores in a month. Today it's less than 9. One of those, by the way, is Amazon. So people's desire to fit shopping into their existing routines is incredibly important. But the third one is the one we're seeing really gain a lot more energy. Where you shop defines who you are. You identify with the store that you're in, you define yourself to that as an overall shopping experience that colors your life and colors the way that you express yourself to other people.
The routine piece for me what really stood out, and I think we're going to see 10 years from now, we're focusing a lot still today on e-commerce versus our online versus in-store sales. I think the metric that's going to become really prevalent in the next 10 years is this idea of automation or self-fulfilling ordering or even predictive ordering. So as opposed to being, okay, we're 20% online, 80% on store, I think we're going to care less and less about this. What we're going to care more and more about is this idea, what percentage of the business is being driven from this self-producing, sort of self-ordering, the fridges that are ordering their own things. The reason why this is going to be important, this self-ordering or this self-fulfillment or predictive fulfillment, is that the business community, the investors are going to look at those multiples very differently because you almost become like a subscription service at that point. So the way that you're going to be valued in the market because you have this tie-in to the consumer where the product just shows up because their fridge ordered it or because the retailer predicted that this was going to be their next order is a very different business model, and I suspect the investment community is going to really look into it very closely. And speaking of community, I think the who we are piece too, I think that's where we're going to see that where the retailers or the grocery retailers especially need to up their game to become more community driven and more engaging. And I know there's been a lot of concepts out there that have tried doing cooking classes and different things like that, usually abandon them pretty quickly because they don't ROI that fast. So you're going to see this notion of community building so that I want to identify myself with that grocer. That grocer, I'm proud to say that I am an XYZ shopper because I feel engaged with that. It's going to take time. It's expensive. And it's sort of the opposite of the routine. So this is really where that split is happening between routine and community.
We all talk about aging populations. Aging populations is a global phenomenon. It's not simply to first world, second world, third world, any other way you define it. The shrinking of families, the aging of the overall population is very real. And what you're increasingly seeing is a concept that's come into being in the last year, which is called aging in place. For those of you that have parents that are over 75 or 80 years old, you understand this intrinsically, which is very simple. I will do anything to stay in my house. I don't want to go into another house. I don't want to go into my children's house. I want to stay in my house. The idea that I can age and stay in my house is incredibly powerful with people as they age, and it's something that we're willing to make a lot of trade-offs on. The idea of aging, now we've talked about smart homes. Smart homes we talk about, take your phone, you turn on the stereo, take your phone, turn on the lights. That's not this. The house is taking care of you. The house is monitoring you. It's making sure that you're active. It's making sure that you're in the right place. It's making sure you're not hurt. It's making sure that you're integrated and you're being fed and you're inside the health benefits that you should be doing, so that you're aging gracefully, you're aging powerfully. That's another term that we've seen increasingly. So when we talk about the smart home in the future, we're not talking about playing music. We're talking about the house doing what the house is supposed to do. It's taking care of you. And from a retail perspective, this becomes interesting, because now I'm talking about a smart consumer. I'm also talking about a smart house. The smart house very likely is my shopper for subscription services, like you say, and for things that are being automatically. In terms of doing health services I might be ordering out, the house is doing that for me, not the individual. So now we have a different balance happening, and we have a different type of dynamic that we haven't quite planned our way out in terms of the retail world as of yet. Another one that we're seeing is when you start talking about smart homes, you're talking about smart cities, smart governments and such. So you're seeing an enormous amount of energy the last 10 years to make cities much more efficient by integrating the entire overall data, the processes, the stream of information that flows through a city to make sure that it could come together and operate as efficiently as possible. So part of that dynamic, frankly, is not just making the city work better, not only working energy better, not only making traffic and all, but now I have a smart home portion of this that is integrating its way into the smart city type concept at the same time.
And what the real unlock here is just for retailers in general or commercial real estate developers, there's always been this disconnect in the data. They had a lot of data on their specific location, and then it was a black box all around, pretty much around them. They weren't able to necessarily connect the dots. So, and being public data, I mean, there's gonna be privacy challenges, obviously, in the way the data gets aggregated, but it's gonna really allow retailers to become a lot more savvy and better understand the movements. Now we're saying the amount of stores we go to got cut down already considerably. How do I know that? How can I really get a better feel for what the interconnectedness is between my grocery store, the park, the other commercial center down at the other end of town? What's the dynamic? What does the flow look like between all these different offerings? And it might make me much more strategic in the way that I can approach my client, knowing more about more about them outside of my store, which right now I have very little information other than third-party data.
So in 10 years, we're talking about, now we've been talking about robots. You might notice it's still not to what we would refer to as practical. 10 years, it is practical, but it's not exclusionary. Robots don't take the replace of people. They become in parallel. They become part of the extension of the employee. They become an extension of the shopper. They become an extension of the individual in the home. Robots kind of change. I think of robots, to be honest with you, as mobile artificial intelligence. That's the best way to think of robots. That's a different type of framework when you start talking into the retail side of this in terms of what we're talking about.
Right. So, I mean, we always think of robots more in the traditional sense with moving parts. I mean, the definition of robot, I think, is going to need to adapt to maybe anything that's sort of smart and can have action reaction. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a physical unit on wheels to be able to do that. There's going to be a lot of different manifestations. But I think the most important part, and part of the narrative's already started to shift a bit, is we're going to be talking more and more about empowerment and augmentation in terms of not replacing the people that are on the floor, but making them better. I'm a big fan of this notion of from clerk to advocate. So we're going to get hopefully these tools. And you were telling me earlier, David, about some of the reporting you've done around payroll. Yeah, the value. You're not going to see drops in the money that's going to be spent on people in your locations. What you are going to see is maybe a drop in headcount, but an increase in the amount of money you're going to be paying to each advocate, because you're no longer the quality of people that you're going to need on the floor representing your brand is going to be very different, and it's going to be augmented by, so the medial tasks kind of get taken care of by themselves.
I often joke with people, but it's not a joke. The people that are going to determine how robots work in stores and homes, et cetera, is not the data providers, not the IT people, it's not the people building robots, it's insurance companies. Insurance companies are going to determine if you put a liability in your store. Is it going to hurt somebody? That's when you will see the shift. Once insurance companies say this is no longer a liability and such, you'll start seeing robots move into the everyday. But it's not going to be an IT thing. It's not going to be a technology thing. It's going to be a finance thing. And that's really important as we move forward and such. So we talk about smart people, we talk about smart homes, we talk about smart cities, we're talking about smart robots, now we're talking about smart buildings. Buildings themselves have become interactive. This is in Shanghai, this is Alibaba's mall on the south side of town. So on the right-hand side, you can see this 10 miles away. The entire building is clear glass LCD. It is running media across it. It is doing basically visual broadcasting to the surrounding world. As you get closer, it starts integrating with your smart devices. As you get closer, it starts gamification. As you get closer to the building, you can start interacting with the building directly by touching it. So you have all these levels of smartness that's engraved to the building surrounding the retail. There's 700 retailers in here. Every single retailer is attached to the outside of the building, engaging it in terms of doing games, in terms of promotions, in terms of setting itself up so that the entire mall is talking to all 700, but also talking to the 500,000 shoppers that have wandered through here for 2 days. And when you start talking about this, by the way, this was for Singles' Day 2 years ago. The integration of this going on to the online efforts that Alibaba is doing at the same time, it's incredibly powerful to see this operating across all mediums in all ways and that you're touching it.
Yeah, and every time I see anything like this, the first time probably for you as well, the first thing that jumps out at me is the amount of data we're going to be able to get. Now, what are we going to be able to do with it is another story, but it's incredible, and obviously the Chinese market is leading with this mindset of yes, it's a manifestation that's important to the customer, but what is it behind the scenes that I'm able to capture? And I think right now the example is the grocery industry is all completely focused on, and beyond grocery, honestly, is the HEMA store. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going through it because I think everybody's seen at least a dozen HEMA reports come out this year. But what I liked about David's approach around it was looking at it as part of this whole smart, how it ingrains itself into this whole smart ecosystem of the last 5 slides we've really talked about. Because how can you take all these different touch points and data points and then have them manifest in a store environment? And I think that's really the mindset that HEMA is bringing to this is yes, it's about convenience, it's about experience, and we've all seen their fish markets and all these great things, and we've even on the floor here see the conveyor belts up in the ceiling. But what's really happening is that's not really the important part. The important part is how they're converting the information that they're getting from all these different sources into a manifestation that's important to the customer. For me, that's sort of the tagline for HEMA.
So you're seeing the commonality already. You're seeing the Omni Digital come about. The Omni Digital being, when we talk about omni-channel, we're talking about omni-channel as the perception of the shopper seeing one company, which we know is not quite true. But Omni Digital is very real. It is all digital, we talk about the Internet of Things, that in 10 years is a given. What does that mean when it's a given? So now you're starting to get into all surfaces are interactive. All surfaces are possible to be engaged with an artificial intelligence of some sort that is learning, building, coming up with new solutions and such. So on the left-hand side, you have AWM solution here for shelf moldings and such. So the shelf, as you're 25, 30 feet away, the shelf is showing you a movie. As you get closer, it tells you what's the items. You get closer, it starts telling you about the product pricing, the objects and such. It's watching, the entire fixture is watching you. And that's what makes that so exciting in terms of the store, because a lot of times when we talk about grocery, we talk about the outside of the store being so exciting, the inside being boring. Imagine if the inside of the store is more interesting than the outside. And that starts making this come possible. When you look on the right-hand side, you see massive digital displays are starting to become real. You see entire walls that can change based on the time of day, the lighting and such. The floors can change. The ceilings can change. Everything can be digital in terms of embedding, because by this point, that becomes part of the actual building material that you're looking at. If you look underneath here, you're seeing clear LCD, which is very real. I actually took this picture from a website 2 years ago. It was for sale. They actually had 25 different solutions for sale 2 years ago. So clear LCD is very simple. It sits inside a glass and it streams media. It is part of the material. It allows you to communicate in real time. You can do it as a touch screen. You can start interacting that way. The possibilities in terms of building materials when you talk about interactive surfaces becomes infinite. The question being, can you retrofit this into your existing store? That's where the struggle starts becoming in terms of how do I invest in this? How do I enable it? How do I make this come real for me as a retailer? That's really the key questions you start getting here.
One of the places I struggle a bit with this is I think we're going in this notion where everything is smart, and soon everything that's not smart is just being considered dumb, right? So that's sort of, especially if we walk the floor and the vendors are going to really be pushing us towards this and saying you're going to be at a disadvantage if you're not fully embracing all this. But keep in mind, we got to understand what it is we're actually trying to accomplish. What is it that we're really, what more am I going to be able to do for my shopper by engaging this? Yes, I'm going to benefit because I'm going to be getting a lot more information on how people interact with it. But what am I going to do with it? Does my company have the culture to actually be able to execute on that information? So as we're ramping up, moving, this switch from smart to dumb, because again, that's almost how you're going to be tagged. You're no longer going to be a smart retailer. If you don't have this, you're just going to be not smart. But more importantly, do I have the culture to really do something with this? Because if I'm going to be really investing in this ramp up, how am I going to benefit from it? And more importantly, how's my customer going to benefit from it?
It's funny, I've gotten into a shorthand. I no longer talk about shoppers and employees, I talk about humans. It keeps it easier, to be honest with you. The employee walking into the store in this environment has their own Internet of Things, their own smart surface surrounding them when they walk in. One of the comments of retail, or comedies, if you wish, your choice. Nobody goes into retail as their first job. That's not what you go to school for. It's not what you chose to do. You wind up in retail as something that works out and you become successful. The new employee 10 years from now is going to be surrounded in their own bubble of smart and AI. So you as a retailer have this critical need of operating in the space of how do you train them? How do you work with them? How do you motivate them? You have a whole different type of palette to work with in terms of that, and also how they work with the shopper.
So two quick points on that. First is most of the technology that I've seen successfully rolled into, this is beyond grocery, but into retail, often benefits the employee more than the customer. It was meant for the customer, but it actually empowers the employee and allows the employee to sort of catch up to where the customer is. So that's the first thing. So think about that. Maybe you'll save you some time and some money if you actually just go straight to helping the employee versus trying to help the customer. The second thing is just going to be a small plug, David, is because you're talking about careers and nobody gets into retail thinking about a career. I'm involved with McGill University, some of you might be aware, up in Montreal, which is where I'm from, just launched a retail management school. And the prerogative of the school is really to make this industry something that is more than a summer job, more than a way to get in. And the reason why is because the school is a multidisciplinary school. So the way we're training tomorrow's retail leaders is really around the idea that it's not just a merchandising marketing piece, or it goes well beyond that. So we're working with the computer science school, we're working with the engineering school around sustainability, the medical school around health and wellness, and how all these things tie in. So just to say that we are working to hopefully get people to consider our careers, not come on accidentally into the head office, but actually make this part of an interesting career path. And this speaks a lot to all the trends that we're talking about. Because 2030, we're going to need people that have a different mindset. They're not just coming from the 4 Ps.
As a retailer, there is nothing casual about the employee in 10 years. You have got to start preparing for that. NRF last year declared, and 2 years ago also declared, that it was time for education. We needed to really get serious about educating the next generation of retailers, the next generation of employees. This all ties in. The challenge of that is going to be interesting to watch as it evolves through and such. So we're talking about the smart home. We're talking about the smart store, the smart shopper, the smart employee, the smart surroundings. I have a brief video that we put together with the soundtrack over top of it so you can understand. Get a sense of what this looks like as an integrated whole and how the total home experience and such works and operates in this type of environment.
The smart home has become the norm for the shopper in the future. Each surface can communicate the status of different parts of the home, along with needs and suggestions for the day and week. Considering the shopping trip, the home helps the shopper see needs and potential solutions. On selection, they're available to her also via all related smart devices. The retailer can be given indicators based on shopper permission. As the shopper gets closer to the store, more ideas and promotions start to be collected by the smart retailer. Expanding those needs into connected solutions to build larger baskets are some of the first suggestions made to the shopper. The store's exterior is aware and monitoring for when the shopper arrives. The store confirms her identity and provides a quick summary to the manager for greeting her near the entrance. Based on possible needs, he suggests she considers some of the new wine options. As she starts shopping, the replenishment part of her shop is being prepared in the back room. While shopping, she may note items to be added to that packaging for collecting at the end of the visit or for shopping to the home. Moving towards the bakery, the store AI start to stream choices to her smart devices for possible options to consider. The bakery is notified of the cake order that is upcoming for a shopper within the store and makes a shift in production scheduling to time correctly. As the shopper moves to produce, the fixtures start to communicate directly to her based on her list combinations. With the assumption it's for a party, the AI recalls that the shopper tends to do fruit combinations and communicates possible selections along with ripeness information. An alert goes to the product manager that a shopper is spending more time than normal in the department and may need some assistance. Checking the department at the same time, he greets the shopper and asks if he can be of help. As the overall number of items expand beyond the normal trip, the store starts to make additional recommendations for wine and beverages. The store team gets an indicator that the shopper is building a more profitable basket and to be alert to her asking for help. The store manager takes note of the alert and decides to check on the shopper's location in the store. He checks with her in the wine section and mentions that the cake is ready for her to pick up. Based on shelf alerts, he notifies the store team to check on the beverage aisle stock levels. Wrapping up the trip, the shopper moves towards the front. The store team validates the product packaged and picked up during the trip. They check if it's going home with her or by home delivery and arrange accordingly. All items have already been totaled and promotions credited. As a known shopper, she approves the amount on her smart device.
Okay, so there's some really important stuff going on there in 3 minutes. First and foremost, my shopper is starting in a house. It's starting someplace out of the store. I start recognizing what she is about and where she is going well before she comes in the store. As she comes in the store, I see her outside the store. I can monitor, I can see her license plate, I can see her, I can do visual identification. I have so many different ways of responding because frankly, even though I might understand what's going on in the home and then they have a shopping list and everything else, by the time they get in the store, they're different. They're changing, they're morphing, they're starting to come up with different ideas and such. The whole reason for going in the store is to come up with new ideas. So now I need to understand, are they becoming more profitable? Are they becoming a larger thing? Is there some place as an employee or as a manager, do I need to engage them? Do I need to help them in terms of their shopping trip and such? So there starts becoming a very different dynamic you have to cope with. Keep in mind, as you saw there, the entire store is interacting with her. Not just the employees. The employees are being notified by the store that there's something unusual going on here. We need to engage her. We need to get more deeper into this as opposed to simply a casual in and out and such. We need to recognize that as well. That's the simplicity. They're going to come in, they're going to come out, that's the end of it. Which type of shopping trip do we have? What type do we not have? My employees are smart. My employees are monitoring the AI. The store is smart. Their home is smart. She's smart. So we have 4 different modes and different matrices we have to cope with as we go through this.
So one of my hopes in 2030 when we're thinking about the future of grocery, and this is, we say the future, there's a lot of different futures obviously, so let's maybe get the semantics, but what I'm hoping for, when we're doing a visual presentation like this, we have to sort of almost caricaturize some of this and over-amplify the visual, but the reality is it's probably going to be a little more, hopefully more organic, maybe hopefully less digital, really. I mean, the best digital is the digital you don't see, right? We keep this what's happening in the back end and all the things that are happening, the magic, without having just screens and screens and God knows what kind of devices. You were saying earlier, in 2030, what is going to be our primary sort of conduit of information? Is it going to be still in our hand? Is it going to be on our face? Is it probably going to be a combination of different things? So, but understanding that there is going to be an interface that's going to be more and more is a voice. I mean, we didn't really get into voice with this, but that's a whole other piece of the puzzle. So just understanding make it as organic, not just, our future is not a future just of screens and digital. It's just what it is about being smarter. So I think that's what really the video did a good job of kind of connecting those dots.
This is all reality-based. That store has been in existence 20, 30 years. That's an asset I own as a retailer. I need to change it to make it better suited to this future. I can see that coming at me. I need to be able to take this and take this vision and make it more profitable as I move forward and such. So really, we have three key elements that you should be leaving behind with this. The new shopper is already pretty well defined globally, not the US, globally, into this Epicurean mindset. The drivers that is creating this more experiential but simplicity-based shopper is in existence, and we understand that today. The smart home will be about taking care of the inhabitant. It is not going to be about simply point and click. The smart home will be taking care of you. The smart retailer, if they're smart, will be connected to the smart home. That will be their other shopper, and that will be an important part as we go forward and such. The smart employee needs to be able to deal with the smart shopper directly and be able to be an added quality to them and an added value as they go forward.
So, David, this is a part of a much larger report. Kantar is going to be publishing some point some of this information. So where can we be looking for this in the coming in?
So this video will be available soon. We will have a white paper out detailing this in a lot more detail than we've gone through today. We also have some PowerPoint. We'll be talking about this a lot as the year goes on. If you have any question for myself and Carl, by all means, grab a hold of us. We are unfortunately available on LinkedIn, so feel free to grab us there as well. There's all types of ways that you can talk to us. We're more than interested in a talk. I really want to thank you on the part of Carl and I to take the time this morning to spend some time with us and to see what the smart future looks like. Thank you very much.